Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer. Because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is Tuesday and we are coming off of 3 days of football due to the reschedule. We got 2 games per day, each of the 3 days of what was a long weekend for many. And Dennis, you know, the good news is one of those games was good.
At least it was my Lions holding on and pulling out the victory. Started to sweat a little bit there at the end.
Yeah, other than that, I guess nominally you would say Pittsburgh came back a little, but it was essentially at least 4 blowouts. I'm tempted to say 5 blowouts and one nail biter down to the end. I feel like every year we get hyped up for the playoffs and we have all these great matchups, and at least one of the weekends is usually dreadful. Let's hope this is the weekend that was dreadful and we aren't in for back-to-backs, but a lot of surprising results. So we'll dive right in. Let's just say, we went from 8 head coaching openings to 7. I'm not so sure we won't go back to 8 or 9 after this weekend based on some of the chatter. We'll start with the first game on Saturday, which was Cleveland Browns at Houston Texans. The Browns had played the Texans on Christmas Eve and won 36-22 in Houston. Weren't even close in this one, a 45-14 victory for the Houston Texans with CJ Stroud. It went from not looking good to not being tenable in a fat hurry there in the second half with back-to-back pick sixes. Dennis, for Cleveland, they've already said that Deshaun Watson will be their guy in 2024, but they're hoping Flacco will be back as a backup. Presumably, there's a chance Nick Chubb is back. They had a pretty good season up to this point. What do you think they need to do to change things next year?
I don't know that they have to change things. I mean, they need to stay healthy. They were on their second left tackle, their third right tackle, missing Nick Chubb, who's arguably one of the best running backs in the league. Your franchise quarterback was out. Denzel Ward has been up and down all season on the defensive side of the ball. And one of the things they did differently than the last time they played Houston was this time they just kept Myles Garrett on the right side going against Laramie Tunsil, whereas the last time they played, they would flop him over to the left occasionally where he would go up against a much weaker right tackle and generate more pressure. I don't know if that was squawking in the locker room between Zadarius Smith and Jim Schwartz and saying, hey, I can rush the passer too. Why are you doing that? Well, I mean, I get it, Big Z, but I mean, you're not as good as Myles Garrett. But Garrett, don't get me wrong, should have been able to get a little more pressure on CJ Stroud. But Stroud played fantastic. I think next year, they're projected right now that to have to cut about $14 million to get under the cap. So we'll see where it raises to and how much flexibility they have. They got Jedrick Wills and Amari Cooper on the final years of their contract. So there's some restructure opportunity there. Teams do a lot of funky math when it comes to contract situation. We've seen New Orleans do it for years and years and years. Just when it seems like there's no way they can keep everybody, they figure it out. I expect more of that from the Browns. I guess from a contract salary cap situation, I guess the plus side is They don't have a first round pick this year, so they're not having to pay that bigger salary.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they come back and they're all healthy. But also, Deshaun Watson, this team, people have commented, are they better without him? They certainly at times this season seemed better without him. Now, maybe it's a matter of them finding that groove down the stretch, and they can, you would think Deshaun Watson's younger, could athletically be better than where Joe Flacco is right now. Be interesting to see. You are right about the defense, though. That was probably CJ Stroud didn't play in that first meeting, but I was mildly surprised to see how easily they moved the ball against that defense.
Well, I mean, Brevin Jordan he beat the coverage and just, he's a tight end and you'd think, oh, well, somebody will catch him, but he's a very athletic tight end. That was his calling card coming out of college, was speed and athleticism. It hasn't come to fruition like, say, former Miami tight end David Njoku has, but there's some talent there with Jordan. And maybe this is the play that kind of vaults him into the next level as far as being a receiving tight end goes. I don't know. I'm not holding out hope. I think if it was going to be anywhere as consistent, it would have been by now. I don't know. Everything went right for the Texans.
Speaking of the Texans now, one of the interesting things every year is when teams have clinched and have nothing to play for. Should you sit your starters? Does it hurt you? Cleveland was one of those teams that sat down a lot of people. Didn't seem like it benefited them that much. On Saturday, Texans are now going to go against a Ravens team, and there was a lot of conjecture about whether the Ravens should or would sit their guys, essentially giving what amounts to about a 3-week break. We saw this happen a couple of years ago where kind of a hot and plucky team that had won a division was then able to come in and clock them. In addition, a lot of people pointed out that teams in the Texans situation that went from worst to first and won a division have all in the past made the Super Bowl. So I ask you, Dennis, based on what we saw and history, do you give them a pretty decent chance going into Baltimore Saturday?
Well, they certainly have more than a puncher's chance, but they're going to need a lot of things to go right. Stroud is going to have to be good. He can't make mistakes. And by and large, this season, he hasn't made mistakes. So I don't think there's any reason to expect anything different. They're going to need to, on defense, play very well. Isaiah Likely has been getting open. We saw David Njoku really put up a lot of points. What was his line? He did 7 for 93. So I think it bodes well for Isaiah Likely against Houston, and that may open it up for Zay Flowers or OBJ. And I don't know, Singletary has to be able to get first downs when they need first downs and be able to maybe eat some clock. He only had 13 carries, but he averaged 5.1 yards a carry. I don't know if I'm comfortable. If I'm Houston, I probably want to have more than what is this, 16 carries for my running backs. I don't think that is going to keep the ball away from Lamar Jackson. And Jackson, I think he's the favorite for MVP. So he's going to be putting up he's going to be working hard out there and putting up some points. So I think if everything clicks for Houston, they're going to need to get a turnover or two. They're going to need to not turn the ball over, and they're going to need to be able to take advantage of opportunities like they did against Cleveland for the big plays. Nico Collins, he is playing fantastic. They put Noah Brown on IR. I think that means they're seeing enough out of Xavier Hutchinson to essentially move into that blocking wide receiver role that it catches the occasional pass. And I think they're seeing enough from John Mechie to maybe say, hey, we're going to let you get a little more work too. I have so many shares of Mechie stashed in dynasty rosters.
It was encouraging to see a little bit. He's been an interesting story. It'd be exciting, and to think, Houston could be even better again next year. They'll have Tank Dell coming back, kind of really building into it there. The other game on Saturday started at a very comfortable -5 degrees air temperature and dropped to -9. And when Miami is involved, they typically don't do well in the cold weather. I don't know why. I told you, I think almost immediately I regretted picking the Dolphins when I saw them out there, but the Chiefs get a 26-7 victory. It was never even really felt that close. Miami had one good play basically in the entire game. Kansas City was consistently driving on that beat up Miami defense, just couldn't always finish it with touchdowns. Yesterday, Miami GM talked about the fact that they're going to bring Tua back and that they expect him to be their franchise guy. That was kind of one of the questions going into this season. We'll see if that actually happens. I know there was some buzz about whether he's the right guy, but the Dolphins now 2 straight years with Mike McDaniel. They made the playoffs and gotten bounced out in a road game in the wild card. They had a tough closing stretch. The Dolphins and the Eagles were probably the 2 high-profile early teams that finished the worst down the stretch and ended up costing themselves the most. What do you think Miami needs to focus on this offseason?
Well, I think they need to keep building on what they've done with Tua. He's shown that he can provide some spark and really put up points with that offense. But I think they need to develop a little bit of depth too. Somebody, when they have Waddle and Hill and they're both healthy, it's kind of hard to defend them and Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. But when you get Mostert hurt and Waddle is hurt or Hill is hurt and they're not playing at 100%, now you have diminished the weapons that you have, and it's a little more challenging. But losing 6 starters off of your defense too, that was pretty much, I felt like, that was going to be a tall order to win a playoff game. I know they didn't play, almost all their losses or all of their losses were against teams with winning records versus their wins being against teams with losing records. So there's definitely opportunity to take lessons from what they've done and learn how to beat good teams. A home game this week would have made a ton of difference for them. And they just, they in the end, they weren't able to win one more game that would have put them at home against Kansas City instead of in, all that frigid air. But I like the weapons they have. I think McDaniel is a good play caller. I know he came out and said when asked if he'd be willing to give up calling plays, and he said everything's on the table. To me, I think that's just him saying, "Look, we're gonna look at everything," but that's one of the things they're really good at. If they change that, I'm gonna be like that. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it was really, to me, the injuries and not having enough depth at playmakers to kind of compete with Kansas City.
Well, that brings us to the Chiefs. Hard to believe Patrick Mahomes has never played a road playoff game. He will have to play one this week. How do you think that changes the calculus for Kansas City?
Well, it's going to probably be warmer than it was in Kansas City last week up there.
It's in Buffalo. I wouldn't put money on it.
Yeah. No, it'll be pretty cold up there, and there'll be a little more snow. I don't think overall the weather will be an issue for them. They've had to face it. They're tough. They have all of the pieces, and it should be a good game. I think, unfortunately, their playmaking depth is limited. They have Rashee Rice, who had a fantastic game. He looked really good. What did he put up? 8 for 130 and a touchdown. Isaiah Pacheco, not a great per carry average, but 89 yards and a touchdown as well, caught his only pass. They just, they need more weapons that are, I guess, NFL starter quality, especially with Kelsey kind of fading this year. He had an off year. It's not Taylor Swift's fault. I think it's more that he's just getting old. That happens. You get old. You just can't quite perform like you used to. It's never happened to me before, honey. And so if they can go into Buffalo and their defense, which it's weird because it's like their worst offense in several years, but their best defense. But the defense still has some work to do. Karlaftis gets after the quarterback. Nick Bolton and Willie Gay are both real strong. I'm not even sure if Gay's injured or not, but they have some players. L'Jarius Sneed shut down Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek Hill said something to the fact that he jammed me all the way to Cancun.
Yeah. So I am looking at the weather forecast. It is going to snow every day in Buffalo until Sunday, when this is the game that I believe is scheduled for. It's the Sunday late game. It'll be 26 degrees for a high. So you're right. It'll be quite a bit warmer than Kansas City was this last week. We'll move on to the Sunday games, and that first one took a lot out of me. The Green Bay Packers went to Dallas, where they now have apparently more playoff wins in Dallas's stadium than Dallas does. Just to add insult to injury, they get the 48-32 victory. I'm going to say the game wasn't even really that close. It was 27-0 almost before you could blink. The Packers came out hot. 3 touchdown day for Aaron Jones. He looked kind of like the Aaron Jones of old. They were slinging it all over the place. Romeo Doubs was probably the big target. San Francisco is what's waiting for them. Green Bay, the youngest team in the NFL, kind of the youngest team to make the playoffs, the first 7 seed to win in this format. What kind of a chance do you give them going forward?
I think they've got a puncher's chance, but the defense is going to have to hold up against San Francisco. The Niners can put up points from, all 3 skill positions, whether it's McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, Debo. They can rack up points in a hurry. So that defense is going to have to hold up. Now, we've seen that Green Bay can put up points as well, but they're a little more methodical. And if I'm Green Bay, I want to keep the ball away from Brock Purdy and that Niners offense. Their offensive line is going to be key. If Green Bay's offensive line can keep that Niners defensive line at bay, that's going to give Jordan Love the time to make the throws. Now, Love is very mobile, and he can throw on the run. He can get out. He can run. That's going to be something they're going to have to work into the game plan. Get him away from Chase Young and Nick Bosa. But he also has to be careful, too, because the Niners have some of the best cover linebackers in the league as it is, and one of the best secondaries. I think one thing that is a positive, and I'm a little nervous because we're at that stage of his career where we don't always get 2 consecutive games from Aaron Jones. Kyren Williams had a very productive day against San Francisco. Punched in a couple touchdowns. He didn't have gross rushing numbers, but he good in the passing game, decent in the running game, and he scored over 20 fantasy points, I think, against the Niners early in the season. So if Aaron Jones can put together back-to-back games, there is a chance. I feel like it's probably going to be much more like the Packers-Cowboys score, but with the Packers on the Cowboys end of it.
Well, I have a hard time believing San Francisco is going to come out and lay that kind of an egg. I think it was encouraging to see Christian Watson back in. He didn't have a huge role in the game, but the fact that he was able to come back, they may be able to get A.J. Dillon back going into San Francisco too. So it'll be interesting. Either way, I don't know about you, but I think Jordan Love has proven that he deserves a shot at being the guy. I know that he and Tua, was kind of an audition year. It feels like he's passed every audition.
Yeah. Oh, he's unless he falls apart over the next couple seasons, and we've seen quarterbacks do that, but it looks like he solved some of the early season completion percentage issues and decision making. I mean, 33 touchdowns and what did he have, like 5 interceptions or 8? No, he had more than that, 8 or 9 maybe. But he had a very good year, and as long as they keep doing things, they're going to need to invest in the O-line. They've got some age there. They're going to need to make sure that gets healthy. I think they've got a great young wide receiver core. They're going to need to rebuild their running back group, figure out how they want to approach that in the off season. But I think Love, I expect him to be there for the foreseeable future, and I'm seeing him top 10 in mock drafts now too. So people are buying into him.
Yeah, he has looked good. Meanwhile, for Dallas, Mike McCarthy, 3 straight 12-win seasons. They have not made it to the NFC Championship game in any of those seasons. They've only won 1 playoff game, and they've actually lost both of their home playoff games with Mike McCarthy as coach. Is he a guy that could be on the hot seat here?
So McCarthy's seat is only as hot as the available candidates. So as long as Belichick is out there, McCarthy's seat is hot. If Pete Carroll decides, you know what, I don't want to go to the front office Seattle, I'm out of here, McCarthy's seat is hot. But I don't think any of these other candidates out there are a threat to Mike McCarthy. I think, it's that conundrum when, you're like, oh, our quarterback sucks, put somebody else in, trade him away. It's like, well, who are you going to get? Like, realistically, who are you going to get? And when you look at the coaching situation, there are not a ton of coaches out. I mean, they're not going to promote Dan Quinn to head coach.
Especially after that performance.
So
I almost wondered if Dan Quinn was mad at Mike McCarthy at times on Sunday.
Yeah, it's, his seat is going to be as hot as the available candidates. And there's only a couple candidates out there, I think, that are a threat to his position, at least this year. They have, I think if they go out next year and let's say they go, 10-7 and still make the playoffs and go 1-out again, I think next year, I think he'll be gone.
The Sunday night game was actually the one great game in this wildcard weekend. That was the Detroit Lions hosting Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Very emotional one. Lions get the 24-23 victory. Dennis Matthew Stafford got beaten up a little bit in this one, but the young Rams really rallied together this season, provided Stafford comes back with this kind of core of players. What things do you think they need to do to remain competitive in 2024?
I think as long as they can stay healthy, they're going to stay competitive because that's the way they've built that team. It's a top-heavy team when it comes to talent, and they don't invest premium picks in several positions, O-line, defensive back, safety especially, and running back. I don't think they're investing high picks in running backs. But they get the most out of the players that they do have. So if the Rams can sort of take a look at where they're at, the big question for me is how healthy is Stafford and can he take is he up to taking another season of hits? At some point you just decide I'm done with it. Especially when you've had back issues and back surgeries. Now, I don't know that Carson Wentz is the answer, but Ronnie Rivers is my RB2 with Kyron Williams, who, if I had to put money down, I'm going to guess Kyron Williams misses 3 games or 4 games next year too. I mean, it's just he's a 195-pound running back that is used as a workhorse. It's just going to happen. That's just how it is. He'll have the occasional healthy season, but by and large, you're going to have to count on him missing a few games. He's very productive, and Puka Nakua is the real deal. Who's that? Davis Allen, their backup tight end, flashed when Tyler Higbee was out, and looks like Higbee might have torn his ACL. We'll see how quickly he comes back, but Higbee's no spring chicken either. What they did with those ancillary wide receivers was pretty impressive. I would have never expected that out of Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson. And to think that it's going to happen again next year, I don't know if I buy that. So it's Kupp and it's Puka, but even this game, you see Kupp caught 5 passes, but only for 27 yards.
I don't think he ever came all the way back from his injury.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch, and McVay's a good coach. He's good at game planning. The defense needs to come around a little bit. We'll see where they do, what they do with their draft picks, and how they invest their money in free agency too.
Meanwhile, for Detroit, maybe we'll call it karma for that call down in Dallas, but they end up reaping the benefits of being a high seed. They're going to get to be home again. They won't have to face the 49ers until presumably the NFC Championship game. How are you feeling about Detroit? This had to have been a monumental moment for Jared Goff.
For Jared Goff, it was a monumental moment for me. It's the first playoff win in my lifetime. And I'm no spring chicken.
You were alive in 1991.
Did they win in 91? Oh, damn. Why am I thinking? All right.
It's their first win in 32 years, but.
Well, I'm older than I look. Younger than I look. Anyways, something like that. I love what the Lions have built. And unfortunately, we've seen them crap the bed before, this season even. And as much as I like where they're at, I don't know. Let's see. Who do they have? They're going
Baker and the Buccaneers. Baker and the Buccaneers.
I mean, I guess the best thing I can say is that I'm hopeful because they have the Buccaneers. Unfortunately, Kendall Vildor and Cam Sutton are two awful cornerbacks. Or at least they're playing awful. They're probably wonderful guys. But it's gonna be tough. We don't get consistent pressure. Yeah, I said we. That's right. I'm a Lions fan. We don't get consistent pressure on the quarterback. We'll have games where we get a bunch of sacks, but we give up plays. We're growing as a team. It's just a situation where, we're not so far removed from being really, really, really bad for a long time. And we're still learning how to be winners. And I'm not necessarily I feel like we can take Tampa, but I'm also not a Baker believer either. So I feel like taking Tampa is going to be something that's that we can do. I don't know about the NFC Championship game, though, but I'm going to ride that wave as long as I have it.
If somebody would have told you preseason that they were going to win 12 games and get to the NFC Championship game, I think you would have taken that. So
I'll take that all day, every day.
On to the Sunday games. The Buffalo Bills overcame lake effect snow and a one-day delay to get the 31-15 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, rallied with kind of a hot end to the season thanks to Mason Rudolph. Some of that magic went away here in the playoffs. But let me ask you about Mason Rudolph. We thought maybe we had heard the last of him, hadn't seen him in almost 2 seasons when he popped up here. Had a semi-decent stretch. Now, there was a lot of talk at the end of this game that he might compete for the starting job with Kenny Pickett next year, which is probably why Mike Tomlin didn't want to talk about the future. But how do you feel about Mason Rudolph?
He's a free agent, so they're going to have to convince him to come back. Because I think after being sat down, and maybe he's going to feel like he wasn't given enough opportunity. stuck in there behind Mitch Trubisky. And then he comes in and he plays well. And so I think he feels vindicated to an extent. I mean, he didn't have a terrible game, 229-2. But the team in general just, wasn't good enough to get past Buffalo. I think that with Rudolph, he's going to be looking. He's a realist, I expect, and he believes. I don't think he believes he's going to be handed a job, but I do think he believes he's earned the right to compete for a job, and so he's going to be looking for that opportunity. And whether Pittsburgh convinces him that that's against Kenny Pickett or not, I don't know. But there's a shortage of good quarterbacks out there. And as much as we like this rookie class that's coming in, even if those top three or four quarterbacks pan out, there's still a shortage of good quarterbacks out there. So I'm looking for Mason Rudolph to kind of, he's going to be in that Taylor Heineke, Case Keenum, Nick Mullins category where he's going to get every now and again, he's going to get a shot. He's going to have a stretch like he had. There's going to be some maybe we should give him a chance. But, I mean, other than the fact that he's willing to push the ball downfield, I don't know how much he's really got going for him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think if they offer him a decent contract, he's going to come back. I don't see that he wasn't a guy that I thought a whole bunch of other teams are going to be vying for.
We thought that about Josh Dobbs too.
But a whole bunch of teams weren't vying for him during the offseason.
Three teams were this week or this season.
Well, made trades during the season.
So I think that, can he beat out Kenny Pickett? I don't know. Pickett's got the pedigree. Pickett doesn't push the ball downfield, but also Pickett has been saddled with, I think he's only thrown 30 or 40 passes without Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So Pickett's got some, something to prove himself.
Well, and Mike Tomlin going into a contract year, so it's going to be interesting to watch a little bit of that as well.
I would expect probably within 30 days they've agreed to an extension. The only reason they don't agree to an extension is he doesn't want to be there.
Meanwhile, the Bills, that window for winning a title has seemed to be getting shorter and shorter. And mid-season here, it looked like it may have swung shut, but they won 5 straight to get to the number 2 seed. They looked really good here. It finally broke the right way for them where they get the Chiefs at home instead of having to go to Kansas City. Could this be the year for Buffalo?
I mean, it's as good a year as any. Josh Allen is playing great. I mean, he was the QB1 for fantasy on the year. James Cook, while not necessarily, being a bell cow, puts up numbers. And Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox work well in the 2 tight end. Dawson Knox is a very good Dalton Kincaid is a very good receiver. And Khalil Shakir has stepped up in the absence of Gabe Davis. I feel like unless they draft a wide receiver, I don't know that they're going to bring Davis back. I think he may go out there the MVS route and try to, find a more consistent opportunity and see if he can take the next step.
Kansas City, we found your man.
Diggs is going anywhere. But I think Shakir could step up and be that number 2 receiver for them. And they run a little more 2 tight end set with Kincaid and Knox. So really it's, what do they call it? The 11.5 personnel there in Buffalo. I think that they've got a good enough team that they can beat Kansas City. And this should be a really, really good game. 2 really good quarterbacks. I think, honestly, Josh Allen has the better weapons. And the defenses are pretty even. So it's going to be who can, which quarterback can put the team on their back and lead them to victory.
Yeah, it would be kind of fun, you know. I'm still pulling for that Buffalo Detroit Super Bowl after this weekend, so we shall see. The final game of the weekend, Monday Night Football, was weirdly another snoozer, and that was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Eagles, and they got the 32-9 victory. And I'm going to say it again, this game wasn't even really that close. Dennis, the Eagles finished 1-5 to slip to the number 5 seed, and they just looked outgunned, outplayed, outclassed throughout the night in this playoff game. What the heck happened to the Eagles?
You know, I think it's a team that just has suffered injuries at key spots. It feels like Jalen Hurts isn't 100%, not just the hand, but he didn't run as much this year. I mean, he only had one rushing attempt in this game.
Yeah, 1 for 5 yards, which is a shocking number.
Right.
And he had some really curious, like that safety early on. I'm looking at myself, I'm like, what the hell is he doing?
Right. It was just it was a weird game. You know, Goddard had a bad drop, if I remember correctly. I mean, Skinny Batman played his ass off, 8 for 148. And it was just a situation where I don't want to say that Sirianni got outcoached, because I'm not a believer in Todd Bowles, so I don't think that's the case.
But it looked like it.
Sirianni didn't coach great. The experiment, you know, hiring Sean Desai as their defensive coordinator and then replacing him with Matt Patricia mid-season, that was just a train wreck on the defensive side of the ball. Their defense went from being bad at pass defense to being bad at everything after they made that change. I don't know if
I do wonder. So they are a team that lost both of their coordinators, and we saw how, despite a thin roster and a ton of different injuries, the Arizona Cardinals were able to come up with some huge wins against big teams like Dallas and Philadelphia. And we saw the Colts, despite being young and a battery of injuries, fighting all the way to the final week to make the playoffs. Maybe he needed those guys.
I mean, they were clearly very good coordinators if both of them were able to land head coaching jobs. And both of them were, you know, fairly odd in the media when they landed those jobs. But behind closed doors,
Sirianni.
Behind closed doors, they seem to be getting the job done. The Cardinals played hard for Gannon. I felt like Steichen was probably going to have a decent year. I wasn't sold on Gannon as a head coach, but he went into Arizona and, you know, brings in Drew Petzing as his offensive coordinator, which to me was one of these, who the F is that guy, hires. And it reminds me now of when Cincinnati hired Lou Anarumo as their defensive coordinator. It's like, well, I guess this is what's left. We'll take you. And Amaruno went in and has been coaching his butt off for 5 or 6 years now. Mm-hmm. I think Petzing has just kind of said, you know, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just going to go out there and game plan and coach it up and, you know, let's roll. And I'm not going to worry about the defensive side of the ball. I'll let Gannon and the D coordinator take care of that. I've got Kyler Murray. I've got these receivers, James Conner, and having great, that's the hard thing. Cause I think when you have young coordinators that are good, they want to be head coaches. Whether they're good head coaches or not, they'll never know until they become them. But as I watch this coaching cycle right now, I'm like, I see these defensive coordinators get interviews, and I'm like, if I was an owner, would I want to hire an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator as my head coach? Because whoever that is going to have to bring in a counterpart on the other side of the ball. And if they're any good, I'm going to lose that guy. And if they're not any good, I'm going to lose both guys. So, and I look at it and think, well, I want to bring in an offensive guy because if he's good, then my offense will stay consistent. and we'll be able to, develop defensive guys. When you bring in offensive guys, they want to put their stamp on it and change their scheme. And we saw it with Ken Dorsey after he took over for Brian Daboll. And it just doesn't always work, or doesn't work a lot of the time. So losing Steichen and Gannon in the first year, or in the same year, I think that really did put a big hit to Nick Sirianni. I don't know, if I'm Desai, I got demoted, I'm looking for a new job now. Screw you. You can keep Matt Patricia. You see how good he was. And Sirianni wouldn't surprise me if he cans Matt Patricia.
I would expect they're going to make some kind of changes after the kind of collapse. He's another guy who, much like Mike McCarthy, despite some of the regular season, and he's even had a little bit of playoff success, they showed the signs during Monday Night Football, people wanting him gone. So be kind of interesting. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay, they get the win. They go on the road now to Detroit. How do you feel about those fabulous Baker boys?
So the thing that I think carried Tampa was that their offensive line got better as the year progressed. They were bad last year, and they were bad at the start of this year, but they just kept playing and just kept getting better. And I don't think Todd Bowles is a great coach, but I do think Baker Mayfield has saved his job, and Baker has probably played his way into a contract with Tampa because they're in the playoffs. They won a game. They're going to want to try to keep it as cohesive, and they're going to want to keep the continuity. So Baker's probably going to get re-signed. Mike Evans is a free agent. We'll see what he does. I think Godwin might be a free agent as well.
I think Godwin's still under contract. Evans will be interesting to watch because it seemed like when he didn't get his preseason deal, he essentially said, I'll see you after this year.
And maybe so, but making the playoffs can change your mind. Their defense has picked it up and has been playing well. Rachaad White has turned out to be quite the find, not only for real football, but for fantasy football. So to me, they need everything to go right for them right now. In part because if it's not going right, Baker tries to do more than he's actually capable of. Go back and watch some of that Cleveland tape and that Carolina tape. He just takes on more than he can handle. I like what they got going on. Todd Bowles, I think he was a really good defensive coordinator at one point in his career. I don't know how good of a head coach he is, but he's got the team playing well this year, and that's what matters right now.
Couple of questions before we get out of here today for you. First, big news last night too, as the game came to an end. Jason Kelce, you could see him on the sideline tell his coach he was retiring. It broke that he told all of his teammates he was retiring. Not a huge shock because I think he was kind of on the fence at the end of last year. But what will you remember about Jason Kelce?
Yeah, he was just a very, very good center and seemed like a great teammate. And he just worked hard to make sure he did all the right things. I would have liked to have seen him maybe win another Super Bowl. I can respect it. What is he, 37 years old now or something?
Might be 38. I think he's 2 years older than
Travis.
So,
he's got young kids. I think, he's going to be able
37 because he was born in 1987. Apparently that's why Travis Kelce wears 87s for his brother.
Okay. So, he's going to be able to do media if he wants to do it. He's a smart guy. He's got a great personality. He'll be able to do just about what he wants once he kind of, gets relaxed. I'm curious to see if we don't see him, midway through next year, some team making a playoff run needs a center. Are they going to, who all is going to be knocking on his door? Is he going to go the Jason Peters route? Try to go with a winner and see if he can get another ring there or something. But I think he's probably going to make it into the Hall of Fame. 6-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, and you are right. I was going to see if the Eagles held his rights. It does look like this is his last season under contract. So, contract details: signed a 1-year, $14 million contract. No, he had his contract. He would go through 2024. So they would hold his rights. I don't know if Philly would let him go. I find it hard to believe he'd play somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but sometimes if Kansas City calls him up and said they're pushing to get a title and their center goes down, you think he'd turn down going to play with Travis?
You never know. But he has some other, interests. They did that movie this year, which was pretty good, and their podcast is pretty popular. I wouldn't doubt that that's a good revenue stream. The other piece of news I wanted to ask you about: Bill Belichick completed his first official coaching interview with the Atlanta Falcons. We haven't heard a lot of follow-up to that. What would you think about that fit?
With them not having a quarterback and not being in a position to get one of the
Desmond Ritter's the new Mac Jones,
and not well, if you read the stories, he wanted to draft somebody to replace Mac Jones. They've got some great players, at least on paper, in London and Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Tyler Algier. Apparently, Algier is fantastic because he kept getting the ball instead of Bijan. They have some good players, and so it makes sense for him to go somewhere. He isn't going to take a complete rebuild. He's going to want to go somewhere, and Kirk Cousins is a free agent, I think, after this year. I could see him go to Atlanta, try to bring in Kirk Cousins, somebody like that. That doesn't mean Minnesota wouldn't franchise tag him or something, but coming off the injury, probably not.
I still think the most interesting might be, it seems like, I know Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Chargers, but there's a lot of talk today that he's working on his contract extension with the University of Michigan. So I'm not convinced he would actually leave. But Bill going to the Chargers, still in the AFC, which is having a franchise quarterback, I actually think then they may keep Kellen Moore, because then he already has an offensive coordinator. He has a lot of pieces in that defense that Brandon Staley never figured out what the hell to do with. So
right.
I think that could be more interesting.
Could be. I think, the thing with Harbaugh most recently is that he's trying to negotiate in that if he gets penalized for, the sign stealing scandal, that they can't fire him for it.
What are you going to do?
Fuck that guy.
Well, I'm no Ohio State fan, so I don't think they would fire him for that anyway. It's hard. It feels like last year he did the same thing. He dipped that he was interested in these places, and then it just got him some more stuff at Michigan. I feel like it's the same thing this year. I just don't honestly believe he wants to go back to the NFL. So we shall see.
Could be.
That'll do it for us today. We will be back on Thursday. We knew you were missing Thursday night football, And we didn't want you to just, cry into a pillow for a second straight week. So we will be back on Thursday talking football, the divisional round, whatever other news comes up, and we'll see if maybe we can get a guest on as well. But we will definitely be here making our picks. Dennis and I have a few days between now and then to commission our prayer circle for the Lions this weekend, and I'll be commissioning my prayer circle for the Buffalo Bills as well. But we will talk about all the divisional games and all that fun on Thursday. Until then, if you're looking to fill some time, not a lot of NFL hot stove right now. So Dennis, what can the people do?
They can go ahead and go to that favorite podcast platform and search out the Fantasy Football Roundtable. Hit that like and subscribe button. Give us a download. Just saw this week on Chartable, we're the 126th most popular fantasy sports podcast in Britain.
Gotta love the
Need to
Brit.
get those USA numbers up.
Indeed. That'll do it for today. Hope you guys have a wonderful